Hello, good morning. We are here for a new podcast. This time is with Meyer Natrup. He is the founder and managing director of MzN International and also Human Planet. Chris, can you introduce yourself and your organizations? Thank you.
Good morning, Claudio, and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for doing this. I look forward to seeing you in person. My name is Chris. I live in Hamburg, Germany. I am the founder and co-founder for both organizations. Indeed, MzN International is a social enterprise that since now 17 years, believe it or not, is building NGOs. And we are taking care of the organizational development, of the strategy, and a big part of our area is funding. Human Planet is a private sector entity working with investors, DFIs, donor-advised funds, and NGOs, so there is some overlap, on specifically advancing the use of sustainable finance, impact investments, outcome-based finance instruments, and all these financial instruments, and make money basically live up and be used for a development aid and climate for a better purpose. And underlying both organizations that work very closely with each other, obviously, is a philosophy of doing good and doing that better.
So, Chris, you have worked with hundreds of NGOs on funding strategy.
Yes.
Are most of them trying to solve a funding problem or avoiding the harder conversation about whether their model is viable at all?
So first of all, there's no they. Every organization is different, and we cannot look at the nonprofit sector and assume it to be a monolith. Everyone is different. That being said, the business model for doing development, and I'm not saying humanitarian here for a reason, but doing development, climate, maybe even parts of development, has always been unsustainable and precarious. What we did in the post-Second World War phase as humans is we've built a donor-centric system, which is government-centric. And as a result, many, not all, but many NGOs have evolved and have gotten very good at risk management from institutional grants, attracting those grants, and attracting donations and matching those up. What they have not evolved to do is build in what many haven't evolved to do, they have built in the private sector or even private capital. And now we are living in this world where there's lots of confusion around the two. And sometimes investors and private capital is seen as this wolf of Wall Street investor. And charity is seen as the social action against it. And of course, the reality is very mixed. I know hundreds, if not thousands of investors who are equally as concerned about poverty, livelihoods, health, energy, human rights, you name it, in whatever country, as their NGO counterparts. And yet there is this chasm between them. So yes, the business model for many NGOs, particularly after the dismantlement of USAID, is precarious at best. And I work with, MzN International, we work with around 300 NGOs every year in a framework partnership. And we see many of those business models, that comes down to three choices, Claudio. Either do nothing and go bankrupt badly, do something and manage a decline, or genuinely add, not change, add to your business model so that you can host and attract a new type of funding, private capital. And then lastly, let me say, back to the monolith, there are some non-profit organizations which have done this fantastically. So they are not that are already have dual tracks. They have in very countries, they have social enterprises. They have I work with NGOs who have banks, so they work deeply in the financial sector to promote financial inclusion. But if we get this right, we're turning a crisis into an opportunity. We're turning a funding crisis to address a fundamental flaw in the development and humanitarian system that has been there since the post-Second World War phase, and that precarious donor centricity. And if we manage to attract conscious, patient, and good private capital, we can make our grants go significantly further. And if we look at the state of the world, that's really what is needed.
Very good. So you build MzN helping NGO win grants, then launched Human Planet to do something different. What was that, an evolution or an admission that the first model has a ceiling?
I'm happy. I happily share this. So we have tried to work with investors and with. I'm a chartered accountant. I come from the finance world, transferred over to the NGO world back in 2008. So I'm getting old, and I'm feeling like I'm now returning to that world. I have returned. We've worked with impact investors since 2016, 2015. So again, 10 years, so a long time again. But what hasn't worked is that these investors, the DFIs, the pension funds, the development banks, they looked at MzN and said, "Hey, MzN is a non-profit entity." There was friction. There was a lack of perception. And in every meeting, I was forced to explain why we do this. So eventually, I sort of gave up and said, they're right. We do need a private sector entity that looks more financial, that is for profit, that can start funds and facilities in 3 different countries. We've since expanded to the UAE. My colleague Sabrine is there. Paris, my colleague Cedric is there, and he's fantastic. We're expanding more and more into the US, into Southeast Asia and China. And that basis was possible only with Human Planet, whereas MzN continues to concentrate on building better NGOs. And the two work very closely together. They bridge that chasm, but we do need distinct organizations for it.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about blended finance.
Right.
Is blended finance structurally limited to the 50 or 60 NGOs with the balance sheets and the legal capacity to play? And if so, what does that mean for everyone else?
No, is the answer. And the underlying assumption, Claudio, in your question is that many NGOs are managed as if they are an island. There is no investor in this world that would do a blended finance instrument in-house. And yet I come across many NGO professionals and NGO organizations, and I speak to boards every week. I'm sitting on a few of them, and I am facilitating them nearly weekly these days. And they feel like, okay, so what capacity do we need to hire? Which lawyer, which fund manager, which entity? And it's like, well, if you do everything in-house, it's going to take you 10 years to build the capacity up. You're not an island. So in a blended fund, you're not just blending capital, you're blending assumptions, you're blending institutions, you're blending targets, you're blending liability accounts. And you just need to, it's like with a Lego brick. You need to combine the bricks in a particular way, which does get very detailed. You need to consider this in different countries with different actors, from the farmer to the health clinic, all the way to the right to the international investor, the national investor, then there's national bank. So you're blending lots of people. You will fail, I promise, if you try to replicate all that in-house. And we know it will fail because the finance sector has tried for a good 60, 70 years and nobody has ever succeeded. That's why it's called blended finance.
So let's go deeper on this idea of blending people's and different skills. So the fractional CSO model, a shared chief sustainability officer, sound almost radical for a sector used to building everything in-house.
Yeah.
Why do you think ownership of the sustainability function is actually a liability for most NGOs right now?
I'm not sure that ownership of the sustainability function is necessarily liability. Again, they're not a monolith. I would expect an environmental expert organization to have ownership about this. All I'm saying is you need like a surgeon, you have a particular tool for every part of the body, and blended finance is ultimately very localized. So even we design outcome-based finance schemes across 6-7 different countries, and in each individual country we have an implementing NGO. We have some investors who cover all 6 countries, and some investors who are only doing it in their country as it fits into their portfolio. Then they have the national banks. Some national banks are happy to invest in neighboring countries because the governments may have a collaboration agreements. Some do not. Taxation is national. Some have double taxation agreements. So 2 of the 6 countries collaborate, 4 do not. So you see, it's getting very tricky. It's getting very finicky. But it's not rocket science. This is not inherently difficult. It's not even that complex. We just have to negotiate longer, set out expectations, be very good at communication, and be a little patient and invest some energy, some blood, sweat, and tears occasionally, and some capital in order to get those deals over the line. I don't even think they take much longer than applying for a European Union grant. I mean, here you're thinking about 8 months, 12 months. To be honest, that's similar timeline here. It's not that dissimilar. So NGOs are used to the pain or the length of time it takes. The wonderful thing that is overlooked, Claudio, allow me to say one more thing, is when you have a 4-year grant, you have a 4-year grant. When you have an impact investment or blended finance fund, and if you set it up right, you have that in perpetuity. Because one investor can say, hey, I'm done, I want out, and you just replace that investor in an ongoing program. That's relatively easy to do. If you have a revolving fund, then it stays evergreen all the time anyway. So this is a much better way of solving the world's problems. And for the first time, if you structure it right, we could actually build the financial infrastructure and the resources that match the problem we're trying to address. Not some donor log frame which wants us to solve a historical complex problem in country Y in just 3.5, 4 years, and we all know from the outset that ain't gonna happen.
Very good. I want you to give me your opinion, and I want to provoke you a little bit.
Okay.
Now, carbon credits as a development funding mechanism. Now, do you think that this is a real transformative way to solve a huge problem that we have, or is just some kind of sophisticated greenwashing?
It can be the latter. Very, very clear. It will never be the first. So it's not a silver bullet. My colleague Cedric, who's actually just calling me right now. Yeah, I'm just gonna kick that away. I'm so sorry. There we go. Claudio, it definitely can be the latter. It's never going to be the first. Carbon credits, if you do them right, and they need to be certified well, and they need to be verified well, and that's easier said than done, can become an additional income stream after 2 to 6 years, depending on the type of credit, depending on the kind of verification. Biochar goes faster, regeneration goes a bit slower, reforestation takes the longest, but even then it depends where, it depends which route. We've built fantastic projects that kicked off funding for 2-3 years and then added a carbon credit income stream directly to the farmers, directly to the people who use the cooking stoves, for example. But there was a problem with the verification. The verification process was extremely arduous if you want to do this right. So people cut corners, which we now know has led to scandal, rightly so. So my colleague Cedric and I, we've actually developed a technological solution to it, which is blockchain-based. Terava, it's called, as part of Human Planet, our partner firm. And that allowed us to verify on an incorruptible blockchain the actual credit basis on location, using satellite data, using in person, using an app, using the block saved on the blockchain, transferred to the exchange, and then it becomes again a permanent rolling revenue stream. Will it pay your entire program? Sometimes. In one of the program, it does actually. Or sometimes it just pays 20%, which is pretty good.
Very good. Let's move into a little bit the future of this sector. So you're building AI agents specifically for NGOs. Now, most of the sector is still debating whether to use ChatGPT or Anthropic. What are you seeing that they are missing, and how much time do they have to catch up?
Claudia, I don't agree with the assumption you're just presenting. If anything, I personally, and again, this is a very unique perspective, not the truth, and it's not a complete picture. I see these principled conversations, which are good to have, more in the global north than I see with our partners in the global south. Most of our partners are now in the global south, and they are just way ahead. You know, they are incorporating this into their work. They have a nuanced understanding of what to use it for, what not to use it for. They've developed internal guidelines. I mean, we're working with the South African organization, and they're in like their 6th version of their AI policy already since 2 years. You know, they have an AI ethics officer who looks at these outputs. They have an AI agent which controls the use of AI within the organization. So, you know, way ahead. Yes, we have built and we continue to do so the AI agents, and if you keep on certain ethical guidelines, if data security is guaranteed, data centrality is guaranteed, no sharing, etc., then you can build with relatively easy effect a decent AI agent. The problem is doing this for one organization is almost always too expensive. You know, we are talking, you know, too much basically. So we said, like, that's our role. We want to build better NGOs. Technology, we're living in the age of technology. Technology becomes super important, and we can fix certain specific problems with very specific AI agents. Now, these agents are very good at the specific thing we designed them for. They are useless for everything else. So when users go and say, hey, we've designed an agent, for example, to find donor funding, and people would sometimes type in saying, draft me that proposal. Well, that's not going to work. It finds you the grants. It finds you the foundation. That's what it's there for. And when people use it for that, it's pretty good. And interesting enough, Claudio, in about a month's time, we are launching, we are at the point now where we're launching GrantWire, which is an AI-based grant search agent, because grant funding is getting so hard to get hold of. We thought we want to make this more available, particularly to the smaller organizations, but to everybody. And we're using our experience last year building and launching the first set of agents. And I'm pleased to say that GrantWire will be completely free forever to everyone. So anybody can go on grantwire.org in a month's time, create a user profile that segregates the data and keeps it safe. And find the grants. And the GrantWire is designed to learn about your organization. So the results on the first use will maybe underwhelming. Use it 2 or 3 months later, and it learned about your file patterns and what you've voted up and voted down. It gets better and better. That's currently in beta test with a few friends and our group of beta users, and we should be ready to launch this in early May.
Very good. Last question from me. Now, you are walking into a room on April 14th at Interaction headquarters with 20 plus senior NGOs leaders who know something has to change, but they haven't changed yet. What's your opening move, and what's the comfortable conversation you are determined not to let happen?
So I'm not one of those consultants who goes in and thinks I've married the truth and I know it all. Far from another. I think the best we can hope for is have an honest, clear conversation. Stay away from the small talk, and let's have a conversation amongst us practitioners to say what works, what doesn't. These NGO leaders, and more importantly, the people in the field, they know what they're doing. And my organizations and myself, we are very good at very specific things: funding, strategy, and org dev, organizational development. Anything outside that, I refer to the experts. And even there, we haven't, we make mistakes like everybody else. I think we need to have an open, honest conversation. The one thing I don't want to happen is not greenwashing, but brainwashing. When the current US administration has dismantled USAID, the amount of messages we receive saying, the court will, the Supreme Court will establish USAID in 3 months' time. Oh, Trump will be over soon. Oh, it will be in 4 years' time. We're going to be all back, and it's not. The other thing is we can't cost reduce ourselves into salvation. We will not save our way out of this. We do need to act and move. And I would like to be an adult, have this hard conversation, and let's acknowledge the reality, and then forge a path together.
So, Chris, is there any topic that we did not talk about in this conversation that you would like to bring up and talk about at the end of this podcast?
Look, Claudio, I'm looking forward to this open conversation with each other. We shouldn't forget, amongst all the technical conversation about blended finance, AI agents, and accepting the truth, and change, and what a pivotal moment we're all in. We shouldn't forget why we do all this. We all could earn more money if we, bought certain stock and worked in certain parts of the private sector. Let's face it. Yeah? We are doing this to build a better world and to help those who are in desperate need, and maybe even to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. At the end of the day, that's what counts. Have we actually made a difference? And is this difference not just a feel-good difference? We've done some good, but does it actually matter? Is it big enough to matter? Or have we improved the lives of 1% of the school children in country X? Well, that's nice, but not really a material change. I think if we remind ourselves why we do this, and if we do this with humility and a little bit of fun, let's face it, there needs to be a bit of fun. And if we do this honestly, then as a sector, together with our private sector colleagues, we will get there.
Chris, thank you so much for this conversation, and I look forward to meeting you in person on April 14th.
So do I. Thank you so much.
Very good. We can stop. Yes.
Stop the recording.